General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, February 26, reveal that Jason finally caught up with Sonny in the quiet, tense space behind the facade of business as usual, and the moment felt less like a reunion and more like the alignment of two forces preparing for impact. For weeks, Sonny had sensed the walls closing in subtle financial shifts, political pressure building from unexpected angles, whispers tied to Sidwell's expanding influence. Jason had been moving in the shadows, tracking patterns, watching movements that didn't make headlines but left fingerprints all over Port Charles. When he stepped into Sonny's office and closed the door behind him, there was no need for pleasantries. They both understood what this meant. Sidwell was no longer maneuvering quietly. He was consolidating power. And he had begun crossing lines that neither Jason nor Sonny could ignore. Sidwell's decision to play hard wasn't impulsive. It was strategic escalation. He had tested boundaries through political leverage, through business acquisitions, through carefully timed pressure points that made it seem as though Sonny's empire was eroding from natural causes. But now, the gloves were off. Contracts were being challenged. Loyal associates were being approached with better offers. Investigations were surfacing at inconvenient times. It wasn't chaos, it was coordinated. Sidwell wanted dominance, not negotiation, and he believed Sonny was weakened enough to take. Jason's return to Sonny's side shifted that calculation instantly. Where Sonny was instinct and fire, Jason was precision and restraint. Their dynamic had always thrived on that balance. Now, standing across from each other with unspoken understanding, they recalibrated. This was no longer about reacting. It was about counteroffensive. Jason laid out what he had uncovered: financial trails linking shell companies to Sidwell's quiet expansion, political endorsements tied to shadow funding, subtle manipulation of alliances that once belonged to Sonny. The message was clear. Sidwell wasn't just competing, he was restructuring the battlefield. What made this adjustment dangerous was the evolution in interaction. In the past, Sonny's enemies attacked directly territory disputes, power grabs, overt threats. Sidwell was different. He weaponized perception. He blurred legality and influence. He built legitimacy while destabilizing opponents from within. Fighting him would require more than force. It would require exposure, strategy, patience. Sonny's first instinct was confrontation, to send a message, to remind Sidwell who controlled the streets. But Jason urged restraint. Sidwell wanted reaction. It would justify escalation. Instead, Jason proposed dismantling the infrastructure, quietly undermining funding streams, reclaiming loyalty, turning Sidwell's calculated pressure into visible overreach. If they could force him into a misstep, public perception would shift. The war would become political as much as personal. Meanwhile, Sidwell sensed movement. Intelligence reached him that Jason was back in the picture, and that development alone altered his tone. He had studied Sonny for years. He understood volatility. But Jason represented discipline, the kind that disrupted clean victories. Sidwell's next move reflected that awareness. He tightened alliances, accelerated certain transactions, and initiated subtle intimidation tactics meant to test whether Sonny and Jason were bluffing or mobilizing. The city itself seemed to lean forward, waiting. Businesses watched. Political figures hesitated. Even long-standing allies felt the tremor of something inevitable. Because this wasn't just a rivalry, it was a recalibration of power. Jason and Sonny, standing united again, signaled a return to an old formula, one that had survived wars before. But Sidwell's modern strategy meant this wouldn't be a replay of past conflicts. It would be layered, psychological, and public. In private, Sonny admitted what he rarely did. Sidwell unsettled him, not because of brute strength, but because of unpredictability. Jason didn't dismiss that concern. Instead, he reframed it. Unpredictable opponents reveal themselves when pressured in the right direction. The key was to dictate the tempo, and so the adjustment became clear this war would not be explosive at first. It would be surgical. As night settled over Port Charles, three men stood on converging paths. Sidwell convinced it was time to assert dominance fully. Sonny, unwilling to surrender legacy. Jason, calculating every angle. The interactions between them were no longer distant maneuvers. They were direct, personal, imminent. And in that shifting balance, one truth emerged. The era of quiet positioning was over. The next move would not just shift business holdings or political advantage. It would redefine who truly controls the city. Laura's decision to call a press conference immediately sent a ripple through Port Charles. She was not someone who gathered cameras and microphones without purpose. Every appearance was deliberate, every statement measured. That alone signaled that something significant was about to unfold. The timing was suspiciously sharp right when political tension was rising, right when Drew's condition remained unresolved, right when whispers about power shifts were growing louder. When Laura stepped to the podium, calm but visibly carrying weight behind her words, it became clear that this was not just a routine announcement, it was a pivot point. Her agreement to allow Willow to step into Drew's former Senate position stunned even seasoned political observers. On paper, it could be framed as continuity stability during uncertainty, a fresh voice to carry forward legislative priorities. But beneath the surface, it felt like a radical recalibration. Drew had not formally vacated his influence and spirit, even if his physical absence created a vacuum. By endorsing Willow, Laura effectively legitimized a transfer of power that many were not prepared to process. The crazy adjustment wasn't just about a new appointment. It was about optics, timing, and consequences. Willow stepping into the role of senator meant immediate elevation not only politically, but symbolically. She would move from private turmoil into public authority. Cameras would follow her. Influence would surround her. Allies would court her. And critics would scrutinize her every move. That kind of acceleration rarely happens without fallout. For Willow, the shift represented more than ambition fulfilled. It was consolidation. Power grants protection. It changes how people approach you, how they challenge you, how they question you. Becoming a senator doesn't just open doors, it closes certain vulnerabilities. Laura's endorsement effectively shielded Willow with institutional legitimacy, but it also magnified risk. Because the higher the position, the louder the collapse if secrets surface. Laura likely understands that politics is about momentum. If Drew cannot serve, the seat cannot remain idle. Stability must be projected, yet her agreement carries layers of complexity. She knows Port Charles is not a city free of controversy. She knows Willow's personal life is tangled. Supporting her now is either a strategic move toward renewal or a gamble that the foundation beneath Willow is stronger than rumors suggest. The consequences are already stretching outward. Sidwell, whose influence thrives on political alignment, now sees Willow not just as a partner in private ambition, but as a formal power broker. That changes his calculations. He will not merely admire her decisiveness, he will seek to leverage her position. With Willow in office, their interactions shift from subtle coordination to potential public alliance. That proximity is dangerous. If Sidwell overplays his hand, their association could become ammunition for enemies. Meanwhile, Sonny and Jason cannot ignore this development. A senator aligned directly or indirectly with Sidwell alters the battlefield entirely. Political immunity, legislative oversight, federal influence, these are weapons just as potent as street power. The war lines are redrawing themselves, not with gunfire, but with policy and press statements. Willow herself may not fully grasp the scale of what she has stepped into. Authority brings scrutiny. Every past decision becomes fair game. Every whisper becomes a headline waiting to happen. The very move meant to secure stability could accelerate instability, because once power is visible, it attracts challenge. Laura's press conference was not simply an announcement. It was ignition. By publicly backing Willow, she has propelled a new era forward, one where private secrets collide with public responsibility. The city will watch closely. Allies will test loyalties. Rivals will look for cracks. And Willow, now holding the weight of a Senate title, stands at the center of a storm that is only beginning to form. Power changes people, but it also exposes them. And as this new chapter unfolds, the question is no longer whether Willow can rise to the role. The question is whether the role will survive what may rise with her. Trina had been trying to hold her world together with quiet strength, convincing herself that whatever tension lingered around her family would eventually settle into clarity. But Isaiah's unexpected visit shattered that fragile balance the moment he stepped into the room with unsettling confidence in his eyes. It wasn't just the surprise of seeing him. It was the tone he carried, the certainty that radiated from him like a declaration waiting to explode. When he made it clear without hesitation that he believed he was the father of the baby Portia was carrying, the air seemed to leave Trina's lungs all at once. Shock did not arrive as noise, it arrived as silence, a deafening pause inside her chest where trust used to live. For Trina, family had always been her anchor, even through complicated chapters. Portia had made mistakes before, yes, but this? The implication that her mother might have concealed something so monumental felt like betrayal layered over betrayal. Isaiah's certainty was the most destabilizing part. He wasn't guessing, he wasn't questioning, he was asserting, and that assertion cracked something fundamental inside Trina's sense of reality. Every memory began replaying in distorted fragments. Conversations that once seemed ordinary now carried hidden meaning. Portia's guarded expressions, the careful way certain topics were redirected, the tension that would flicker across her face and vanish just as quickly. Trina had trusted those reassurances. She had believed in the stability of her family narrative. Now, Isaiah's words forced her to confront a possibility that felt almost unbearable, that the truth about her own family might have been rewritten without her knowledge. The emotional explosion building inside her wasn't just about biology, it was about identity. If Isaiah was right, then everything connected to Portia's current life shifted. Relationships redefined themselves, loyalties blurred, secrets multiplied. And Trina found herself standing in the middle of a storm she never asked for. The confidence Isaiah displayed made it worse. It suggested that he possessed information dates, timelines, details that supported his claim. That kind of assurance wasn't casual. It was calculated. For Trina, the most painful part wasn't anger. It was disillusionment. She had believed her mother's love was rooted in transparency, even when the truth was messy. The idea that Portia might have hidden the paternity of her unborn child shattered the foundation of that belief. And if Isaiah's confidence was misplaced, if he was wrong, then his intrusion still inflicted damage. Because doubt, once introduced, does not disappear easily. It lingers. It corrodes. This revelation also ignites larger consequences. Curtis would be drawn into the chaos. The legitimacy of the pregnancy's timeline would be scrutinized. And Trina, caught between loyalty to her mother and the unsettling logic in Isaiah's claim, would be forced to question everything she thought she knew. The emotional detonation isn't limited to one relationship. It ripples outward, destabilizing trust across multiple bonds. What makes the situation combustible is not just the possibility that Isaiah might be the father, but the way he carries that belief. He isn't seeking confirmation quietly, he's asserting presence. That assertiveness threatens Portia's carefully managed stability. And for Trina, witnessing that confidence feels like watching her family's truth unravel in real time. In the aftermath of Isaiah's visit, Trina's faith won't simply crack, it will fracture. Because once you realize the people you trust most might be capable of hiding something this profound, the world shifts under your feet. And the explosion that follows won't just reshape Portia's pregnancy. It will redefine the emotional landscape of Trina's life.